Okay, pure clickbait over here, and why not? It's the World Cup and I'm rather enjoying it. You would have noticed that France's FIFA football team doesn't look like your traditional beret-wearing, striped jumper and garlic-having, bread and cheese slicing, affair-having, sacre bleu swearing typical Frenchman. People have mentioned this on social media. And just so we know what we're talking about, here's a picture of the team. Does this say anything at all about French society? And if so, what? It might not say what you think it means. Let's get a few things out of the way before we go on. Skin colour has nothing to do with being French. It doesn't determine your Frenchness. If you're very pale on this side of the spectrum, you qualify to being French, and if you're very dark on the other side of the spectrum, you're still just as French. So your family name has nothing to do with it either. Frenchness is a piece of paper, just like being American is. I think the real question here is, who plays which sport in France and what does it say about French society? When I first moved here, I was surprised to hear that in the United States, soccer/football was considered a posh sport. Not quite like hockey, golf or polo, but posh all the same. Why? Well, simply because if you live in a big city, there wouldn't be any football pitches. There would be basketball courts, of course, exactly. So you need room to have a football pitch, which means that if you have access to them, it probably means that you live in an upper or middle class area in suburbia. That's where the middle class or the upper class live. In Europe, football is considered a very entry-level sport, very ordinary. Not just because of the violence associated with it, the opal mantas, the pop culture, the mullets, or the apparent lack of complexity of the game, just because of availability. In every village in the UK, just about, there's a football pitch. Same thing in France, in Belgium, or the Netherlands. France has easy availability to football fields, which usually appeals to a certain social and economic demographic. The perception of football as a sport in France is not, this is where the higher-ups hang out. That's not how they perceive football. No one in France, I don't think, has ever associated football with culture. It's rather looked down upon, apart during the World Cup, then everyone becomes a fan, but it's usually looked down upon, and it gets very interesting here actually, because two middle-class mums talking in France and in America would want different occupations for their kids on a Saturday. Saying that your kid is kicking a ball around on a Saturday doesn't sound like time well spent in France. Saying the same thing in America means that your daughter or son is spending time with other middle-class kids from more affluent families. Same sport, different perception. But it's not just about who you hang out with when you play football, although it does count quite a lot. It's also the fact that football is perceived as a very basic sport, one that doesn't challenge the mental faculties of the person playing it. We could say that tennis doesn't develop the brain any more than football does, it's a fair argument, but it's somehow illogically believed that it does, and that it is time spent better than kicking a ball around. So why are all the pro football players darker of skin than the stereotypical Frenchman that we might have in mind? Or simply put, where are all the white guys? I think it's the wrong question. The misleading part of this football team is the colour, because it has nothing to do with skin colour. Skin colour just makes it more striking visually. It really has to do with immigration. In the 1930s and the 1950s, you had waves of Polish immigration in France, and this gave us legends such as Raymond Kopa, who won the Ballon d'Or in 1958 and played for Real Madrid. And he was the son of a Polish miner and literally lost a finger working in the mines himself before turning pro. Then you had the Italian wave from the 1950s to the 70s. Italian workers migrated to France for industrial and construction jobs, which led to the great Michel Platini in the 1980s. If you look up the French football team from 1986, Mexico 1986, you'll see that it validates my point. You had 5 players of Italian descent. You had Michel Platini, Bernard Gengini, Bruno Bellone, Jean-Marc Ferrari and Patrick Battiston. You also had two Spanish players, Luis Fernandez, Manuel Amoros. You had a Polish player, Yannick Stopira. Then you had a Malian player, an Algerian player, a Maltese player, a player from Guadeloupe. Then you also had your traditional French players, regional players, and you had 10 of those. If you look carefully at the 1986 French team, which I'm sure you will, the attacking and midfield core of the team, 8 of them, out of the 10, 8 of them were the children or grandchildren of recent immigrants. As we might say in America, ain't nothing new under the sun. It wouldn't have been so striking, because in those times, most people from Italy or Poland would have been Caucasian, thus blending in easier with that stereotypical French team perhaps. So let's be clear, it has to do with social mobility, foremost. If you're the son of an immigrant, even if you are 100% French, it doesn't matter, that's not the question. And if you have unusual athletic abilities, and you have been scouted by the very, very aggressive French scouting system, you know, France has a state-funded elite national academy, several academies in fact, such as INF Clairefontaine, you have a golden opportunity to make more money than you would ever make in a lifetime. But then again, who does this reasoning appeal to? In France, we rather more think about culture before money. It's just that type of thing. You know, we think in terms of social positioning. We instinctively think, well, you might be very rich, but you still don't have an education, which means you're still rather no better off. A middle-class family from France will think twice about putting their kid forth to be a future pro football player. Now, of course, there are many middle-class French families who aren't Caucasian, who aren't white, of course. It's like that syllogism, you know, I think Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. I think that's the way it goes. But as much as it's true that many middle and upper-class families in France aren't Caucasian, it's also true that a lot of sons and daughters of immigrants are darker of skin, and these families might live in one of those cités, which is like the equivalent of American projects, the Cités, or the counter estates in the UK. They would live next to a football field. So I think football in France is a question of heritage, foremost. How much do you have to lose? How many chances are there of you climbing the social ranks of France as a North African, for example? What sports are on offer where you live in France? How much do you lose or gain by being a pro football player? And how does your education value the sport of football? I hope this was useful. This was my take on football in France. I hope you enjoyed the video and I look forward to your comments. My name's Chris from We Communicate. See you in the next one.